Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. And first we're going to talk about Kharkiv direction. According to information we have that we continue receiving from different mappers, the Russians managed to improve their positions further in the southern part of Vovchansk, and as a result of another offensive operation, the Russians established control over some buildings and some structures along Ivano-Franko Street. This information was confirmed by reliable mappers, but yet we haven't received any geolocations confirming this. On the other hand, we continue receiving updates about possible Ukrainian counter-offensive operation that took place in the southern part of the north of Vovchansk, and we have changes on map according to different mappers, and the most important, we have geolocation. On this video, for example, we can see how the Ukrainian forces managed to establish complete control over this building and how the Russians were bombing the Ukrainian forces, trying to force them to fall back. Based on this video, as I understand, the mappers made their changes on their maps. Now let's talk a bit about this territory once again. If you remember, during the previous few days, the Russians were bombing this industrial zone heavily using FABs and using 12 flamethrower systems. Most likely, when we were discussing the situation, we made the conclusion that most likely the Russians were bombing this territory because they were preparing themselves to cross Vovchansk River and to capture the railway station. But now, as we can see, the Russians were bombing this territory, trying to reduce the Ukrainian possibilities and Ukrainian reinforcements that being sent to the Russian side of Vovchansk River in the southern part of northern Vovchansk. As you can see, there is still a very complicated situation, and currently both sides, either the Russians and the Ukrainians, are fighting for the initiative. On the other hand, in the eastern part of northern Vovchansk, the Russians continue bombing the Ukrainians. We see that Ukrainians are not able to hold significant forces in this area, and most likely during the next few days the Russians will improve their positions and capture additional strongholds and the buildings in the northeastern part of the stronghold of the city, trying to reduce the Ukrainian foothold in this area. Now let's move to the southern Kupiansk direction. We have additional updates from the village of Makiivka. According to information we have, according to our discussions yesterday, the Russians controlled just the southern part of the village, but now the mappers started updating their maps, and according to different mappers, the northern part of the village also was captured by the Russians. So currently the Russians control every single building and every single street that located on the Russian side of Zherebets River. The Ukrainians still save control over some buildings on their side of the same river. So it's very important progress, because if this information is correct, in the very near future we're going to start receiving updates about additional Russian progress in the southern direction towards the village by the name of Nevskaya. Now let's move further and let's talk about Siversk direction. The Russians continue offensive there. If you remember, just during the previous few weeks we were talking a lot about the village of Krasnohorivka, about the strongholds and the network of the fortifications in the vicinity of the village. The Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation provided us information about complete control. We got the video with flags and so on. And starting of 15th of July, the Russians reported that they began offensive operations towards Fedorovka, and the Russians published the video. The Russians are saying that in this video we can see how the Ukrainians were bombing and attacking the Russian forces who managed to capture this tree line. So as a result of unexpected attack, the Russians captured this stronghold, and then the Ukrainians were trying to conduct counteroffensive, and before possible counteroffensive, the Ukrainians were bombing this territory. So summarizing everything, we can make a conclusion that in the very near future the Russians will try to attack the Ukrainians in the southern part of Perezhne, and the Russians will try to continue offensive operation in direction of Fedorovka with the purpose to establish something like this between two settlements, and based on this foothold the Russians will try to improve their position. So it's going to build something like the southern Siversk flower that obviously should bloom after the Russians establish control over this territory. Now let's move further. There are very heavy clashes in the southwestern part of Klishchiivka. According to different mappers, the Russians continue improving their positions on the hill 225. This is the hill of 225. According to mappers, the Russians gained additional foothold, but there are still Ukrainian positions. But obviously, due to these reports, due to the critical situation of the Ukrainians, most likely by the end of July, the Ukrainians most likely will abandon every single fortification area and stronghold on the Russian side of Seversky Donetsk Donbas River, and they will be forced to fall back on the Ukrainian side of the same canal. Now let's move further. Let's talk about New York. According to information, New York Toretsk agglomeration, according to different mappers, the Russians improved their positions. Today, the pro-Ukrainian mappers confirmed that the Russians captured positions inside of Zalizny along Pershatravneva Street, Lomonosova Street, and Kaspiivka Street. Also, we have geolocation that confirm additional Russian progress in New York. In this video, we can see how the Ukrainian drone was attacking the Russian soldiers' evacuation team between the streets of New York, between Ivano-Franka and Kazatska streets. So this video was geolocated here, which confirms complete Russian control over this territory. There are still a significant number of streets and buildings that are contested, but according to different mappers, they were also captured by the Russians during the previous stages of assault operation in New York. Now let's move to the western Avdiivka direction. According to different mappers, the Russians continue moving along the railways towards the village of Progress, and they managed to establish additional positions, additional control. And currently, the distance between the first building of Progress and edge Russian positions is around 500 meters. So it's already nothing. Furthermore, the Russians, as you can see, managed to enter this forest, which is very good shelter, very good protection against Ukrainian FPV drones. So basically, summarizing everything, we can make a conclusion that the Russians began the storm process of Progress. They are still, let's call it very far from the first buildings, but this is already one stronghold. Village itself and the forest around. This is one stronghold. The town it's not a town, but it's already one place. Now let's move to Novoselivka Persha. The Russians continue making pincers less and less for the Ukrainians inside of this village. We have additional control confirmed by different mappers inside of the northern part. The school was captured. A few days ago, this information was confirmed by pro-Russian sources. Now we have the same confirmation from pro-neutral sources. And we have additional progress of the armed forces of Russian Federation in the southeastern part of the same village. The Russians captured additional tree line and got closer to create a complete cauldron of this territory. Most likely the Ukrainians are about to begin withdrawing process. Now let's talk about Yasnobrodovka. Pro-Ukrainian mappers confirmed almost complete control over the village, but even according to their sources, the Ukrainians still control probably 20 or 10% of the village. But the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, as you remember, reported about complete control during the previous week. There are very heavy clashes among the main supply road, evacuation road in this area. In this video, for example, we can see Ukrainian personnel carrier that was located along this road, and that the Russians were FPV droning this vehicle for few times, and after second or third strike, the armored vehicle was completely destroyed. The Ukrainians were using this armored vehicle here to support their forces and to create a safe road for those Ukrainians who are currently trying to evacuate themselves from Yasnobrodovka towards the mainland. So this is the situation in this direction. Now let's move further. We got additional updates from Krasnohorivka. The situation in Krasnohorivka reminds me the situation of Vovchansk. The Russians improved their positions in the northern and the northwestern part of the village. We have geolocation, we have video that was published by the Ukrainian sources. In this video, we can see the building that, according to the Ukrainian author, was captured by the Russian soldier, and we see FPV drone of armored forces of Ukraine that was trying to destroy the Russians inside of this building. Based on this video, most of the mappers have adjusted their maps and add additional progress of the armed forces of Russian Federation. On the other hand, we continue receiving updates from the southwestern part of Krasnohorivka as well. Different mappers have adjusted their maps, and we had some doubts about the situation. We got the video yesterday because most of the mappers have adjusted their maps based on this video. In this video, we can see the Ukrainian positions in the southwestern part of the village under very heavy Russian fire. This is a Russian drone who was flying above these two structures and was trying to find or trying to discover or to spot the movements of armed forces of Ukraine, and they spotted the some movement of Ukrainian soldier, and after that the Russians start bombing this territory. So based on this video, most of the mappers adjusted their maps, including farms and some buildings in the southwestern part. Most likely the Russians will try to restore control, so this is something like a temporary position of armed forces of Ukraine, but this is very important movement from the Ukrainian side, because this way the Ukrainians first of all are trying to reduce the Russian pressure in the northwestern part, and to allow those Ukrainians who are currently about to be encircled and are about to get into Cauldron for evacuation. So this is the main purpose of Ukrainian attack from the southwest, to force the Russians to redeploy additional reinforcements in the southern direction, which will allow the Ukrainian forces who are currently in a Cauldron to evacuation. So this is something like small special operation conducted by the Ukrainians. Now let's move further. We haven't received anything from Krasnohorivka direction. There are still very heavy clashes. The sources reported that the Russians are sending more and more sabotage and reconnaissance group to the road 0524. There are very heavy clashes. Both sides, either the Russians and the Ukrainians, suffer losses. As for Staromayorsk-Urozhaine, during the previous nights, the Russians managed to improve their positions according to different mappers and to shorten the line of combat contact between two villages. And the most important, that the Russians captured the northern stronghold in the north of Staromayorsk, and now there are no barriers in front of the Russians to start moving in direction of Makiivka. So most likely during the next few days the Russians will try to capture the strongholds between the Russian positions in the village of Priutin and Makiivka. So something like this the Russians will try to conduct, and as if they are able to capture these strongholds, then the Russians will try to move further in direction of Makiivka. Very interesting situation, as you can see. As for Zaporozhye, no changes on the ground. Kherson direction, just few videos with FAB strikes, with artillery strikes in the area. And during the previous nights, the Ukrainians conducted massive drone strike above all over the entire territory of Crimea. There were few explosions, and after the Ukrainians were out of drones, the Russians launched missile strike from Crimea to Odessa. And as for Odessa, there were very heavy explosions. Most likely the Russians managed to discover the positions or warehouses of Ukrainian missiles or something like this, and after that there was a very heavy explosions and the secondary detonation. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.